You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 103. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. You want to make a difference. You want people to have a relationship with Jesus. You might even want to change the trajectory of someone's life. You might see problems around you, the challenges in our world, and they might even make your heart break. But you're not doing anything to address it.
Or there may be so many things to choose from, you keep debating what to do, and really you get caught up in the paralysis of analysis.
Now, before you think, what in the world are they talking about?
That's our point today. We want to talk about 3 ways clarity drives connection and animates your purpose.
So you might be thinking, how can clarity do that? Now, Tim, as we jump into this episode, we're talking about human relationships in this episode, right?
Right.
So as we consider how we can help you follow Jesus every day where you live, work, and play, we want you to have the clarity that fosters connection with God, with your local community, and with other people.
So today we're diving into 3 ways clarity drives connection and animates your purpose. We'll share a few examples and unpack our mission too. So
before we go any farther, let me remind you that this episode of LeaderCast is brought to you by It Takes Courage, a 4-week study of scripture and courage that starts today when this episode releases, January 21st. So if you're listening to this at another time, look for it to be available in another season. You can access this study until Saturday, January 25th at 11:59 p.m. How's that for being precise? So what we're looking at in this study, and it's a daily Bible study for you to read, reflect, respond, and return to the scripture. So you're going to learn how to seek transformation in your life through a 4-step process that I just ran through very quickly. We'll do that in a little bit more detail in the study. You'll have an opportunity to deepen your relationship with Christ and, most importantly, build your courage muscles so that you can follow Jesus every day.
You can find a link to It Takes Courage on the show notes page. This study and the resources we're sharing with you help Jesus followers become courageous leaders. You can find resources for this episode at transformingmission.org/103. So as we think about clarity driving connection, why is it important?
Well, as you've already said, Tim, it animates our mission. Said differently, it helps us act on our purpose. If we're not clear, we can't respond. We also can't invite others to live into our purpose or to respond to something that is a need around us. Does that make sense?
Well, it does to me because you're speaking my language. And I have a feeling we just might talk about something that has always helped me keep focus.
Yes, we are. But let's begin with the 3 ways that clarity drives connection before we jump into what you were just hinting at, Tim. So here's my question for you, Tim, and also for our listeners to think about. Have you ever been given a fuzzy direction for a task or a project by someone? It could be, a colleague of yours that asks you to do something. It could have been a supervisor, and you bring that task back or that project back to the team, and they say, well, that's not exactly what we wanted.
Yeah, I've kind of lived my whole life that way. I can think of one particular time being asked to head a committee, task force, a group of people around how to spend some money that came through selling property. And I met with the committee. We came up with a plan, an idea. I took it back to the larger group, and they all kind of looked at me and said, well, that's not quite what we had in mind. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, we thought we'd spend the money differently. And I said, if you'd told me how you wanted to spend the money before we started, I wouldn't have spent my time doing that. So is that what you're talking about?
You wouldn't have even needed to tend to that task because the decision was already made. Yeah, right. That's a great example of what I'm talking about. So sometimes the decision's already been made and people give you this fuzzy task to go through the motions. It's not helpful, or they're just not clear about what the task is.
One of the things you've taught me that Brene Brown says is clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And I certainly feel like it would have been a whole lot more kind to me if people had been clear about their purpose when we put that little task into motion.
Yeah, that quote helps me as I'm talking with people, and let's say we're trying to plan a workshop or we're trying to make decisions about things. That quote runs through my brain, stopping me to think, okay, am I being clear about what I need, what I'm asking for, and do I understand what they need? And so that's the first way that clarity drives connection. You named it, Tim. It's kind. When you know what is expected of you, most of us can rise to the occasion. And in the process, the people involved end up having the confidence to do the work. Collectively, you have an understanding of why we're doing this and why it's important and what the expectations are for the task ahead and how it's going to be used.
So what you're saying is when we're focused, when we're clear, it's kind. Now, notice I didn't say it's nice or being nice.
You are right.
And being kind.
And that might be a podcast for another day where we talk about the difference between being kind and being nice.
So, Sarah, what's another way clarity drives connection?
Well, it tells us what we're connecting to. So if we're not clear, we don't know what we're connecting to. When we are clear, we know what we're connecting to. Is it a connection between two people? Are we making a connection between a person and a purpose? Are we making a connection between a person and a team?
So let me see if I can test something here. On our website, it reads, resources and coaching for Jesus followers to become courageous leaders.
Yes, it does. And I wouldn't say that that's the totality of what our purpose is. It tells people what we offer when you land on our homepage, resources and coaching. Now, I would say coaching is clear.
Yes, so we can even get clearer. What kind of resources?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. So we might say Bible studies and workshops for Jesus followers to become courageous leaders. But when we do that, then we drop out the coaching. So maybe something like Bible studies and coaching for Jesus followers to become courageous leaders.
So we want you, our listeners, to connect to our coaching and Bible studies. We can probably get even clearer. Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And so, again, we're using ourselves as an example. For you to be able to connect to either coaching or to Bible studies, you need to know that that's what you're connecting to. You need to know that that's what's available from us. So this reason builds on clarity. You want people to say yes to something. We want people to say, yeah, we want to experience coaching, or we want to explore the Bible studies.
So what's another way clarity drives connection?
When we're clear, it tells people who it is for and who it is not for. So let me give you a silly example, and then I'll have an example from the context of faith. The silly example is same sort of work being done, but humans don't use a dog groomer to get their hair cut. Can we agree on that? The dog groomer wants...
But they're cutting hair.
Right, they're cutting hair, but they're cutting a dog's hair. The dog groomer wants to connect with humans who have dogs who need to be groomed. So as humans, you either have a barber or a hairstylist cut your hair if you need a haircut. So think about how confusing it would be if where you went to get your hair cut, there was a picture of a dog with a pair of scissors on the window. As you were walking in, you'd probably stop and say, wait a second, am I in the right place? Because the picture of what you're seeing is not communicating that connection. You want to see a human, even if it is, a profile picture or something. It doesn't have to be a real picture of a person, but something that demonstrates, this is a place for humans to get their haircut. What that picture communicates is that a dog can get their haircut there.
I'm sorry. That sounds funny to me. I'm just laughing.
I told you it was a silly example, but it makes the point.
So what you're saying is clarity drives connection by communicating who it's intended to be for.
Exactly. So here's an example from the church. When I was serving as a youth pastor, it was in my first month of beginning to serve in full-time ministry in the local church, and I put an announcement in the bulletin for a seniors Bible study. We were going to meet, I think it was on Wednesdays at 3:00. It was right after, my intention was that it was going to be right after school. And I got a phone call from a woman who was in her 60s asking if the Bible study was for her. Now, my intention was that it was intended for high school seniors, those that were in their final year of high school, getting ready to graduate. And she read it as senior citizens. Now, the fun part of the story is she did come, and I learned later that she did know that it was for high school seniors, but it was a way for her to connect not only with the special group of students that she cared deeply about, but it was a way to connect with me as a new youth pastor because she was a senior. And so it had a double meaning for her, but she connected with this group of high school students, specifically seniors, who absolutely loved her and she loved them. And so that clarity drove connection because it communicated, well, in a circular way, who it was intended for. She knew it wasn't for her, but it's a funny example to me of how I know there were other people who did think that it was a study for senior citizens. And when they found out that it was a study for seniors in high school, they went, oh, okay, not my Bible study. And they never showed up and they never engaged. It communicated who it was for and who it wasn't.
I think that woman would be pretty cool to know.
She is a pretty cool person.
So we've given you 3 ways clarity drives connection. It's kind, it names expectations, it clarifies what you're connecting to, and the third, it clarifies who it's for. So can we talk about mission here for a moment?
I know you've been waiting patiently for us to get to this. So of course we can, because something as big as our mission isn't always clear.
Yeah, when we say we make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, is there clarity in that mission?
If I'm really honest, no, there's not really clarity. So let's take a look at it piece by piece.
So when we look at the mission, the first part is to make disciples. So when we say make disciples, we know what we're doing and we know who we're discipling. So that seems to be relatively clear, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I also think we know we want something to change all over the world. There's that transformation of the world piece in there.
So maybe the question is, how does making disciples transform the world?
Or is the question, how do we make disciples so the world is transformed? Before I leave that, I want to pause here for a second, because this transformation of the world, we're playing with it as not being clear in terms of what it looks like in my neighborhood or in my backyard or in my city or in my town. It does tell me why we're doing this. And as we've already said, that's part of the clarity driving connection. So there's a why there. There's a bigger purpose there. And so when we think about clarity that drives connection, always speaking to a why first, the quote, I don't even know who said it, we lose our way when we lose our why. If you don't know why you're doing something, you're likely going to have a hard time connecting with the people to fulfill that mission. So there's a piece of that transformation of the world, no, that is not clear, but what is in that is the why.
And that's why we talk about, you and I, Transforming Mission, talk about hope and disciple making.
Yes, because hope for us has become an acronym, but I'm guessing that we've probably just lost some of our listeners. So why don't we unpack what hope means? Because it's a good example of how clarity can drive connection when we start with this big mission and then start fleshing it out so that it gets clearer.
Okay, when we talk about making disciples, we remind people that there are 4 aspects of disciple making that we need to cover, or we're probably not going to make disciples. It's our way of helping people see what to focus on. So using the acronym HOPE, the first letter, H, stands for hospitality. And the question that goes with that is, how are you reaching out and receiving new people? Or how are you building relationships with new people? Now, Sarah, you did something with Clifton Strengths that may help us here.
Yeah, we've started with a big mission. We're now breaking it down into 4 different aspects of disciple making. And now I'm taking it even more specific to someone's unique talents and strengths. And so what I did with all 34 of the Clifton Strengths themes is I ran them through this acronym that we're walking through right now to see how different talents, like we talked about last week, might bring this acronym of hope to life, how different talents might make disciples. So here's the good news. However God's wired you, whoever God has created you to be with your unique gifts and talents, you can live into hope. So let me just give you one example for H, and this comes from the learner talent theme. And people that have the learner talent theme have a great desire to learn and want to continuously improve. For them, it's about the process of learning. So when we think about hospitality and reaching out and receiving new people and building new people, someone with this talent might begin by exploring the origins of hospitality in Scripture. They might want to understand why it's important and what does the Bible have to say about it. Or they might approach meeting new people as an opportunity to learn. You're learning people in this example. So what's the next letter in our acronym of HOPE? What does that stand for?
Well, we're looking at O. O in HOPE is for offering Christ. And the question is, how are you creating opportunities for people to say yes to Jesus? First through baptism and then through ongoing interactions. But how are you inviting people into even a relationship with Jesus? So, Sarah, I want you to share with us a couple of ways different talents might offer Christ so people can get an idea of what we're talking about. I mean, you're good at putting all of that into perspective.
So someone with a strategic talent might offer Christ by using their ability to find the best route to guide someone else to connect people to Jesus. They might also be intentional about the plans and preparation for baptism because there's someone who's going to see the different steps, the different markers along the way of helping people to gain clarity, to move forward, to come to the place where they want to say yes to Jesus, where they want to be baptized. Me to give one more?
Well, sure. I mean, you help give clarity, which we're talking about today, to the mission when we're finding our way through hope.
So another way for someone with a strategic talent theme, they might, because there's an aspect of this theme that is creative for some folks and they can use their imagination to see the possibilities. So to use that part of them to identify different ways throughout the year that people can make commitments and you can invite people into making commitments. So whether you have a small group in your home, it might be as simple for someone with a strategic talent to be able to say, okay, what's the scripture that we're reading today and what are we going to commit to doing? So let's say you're studying the Psalms. So it might be that you make a commitment that day to pray for everyone who's a part of the group. And someone with a strategic talent makes those connections from what is happening in the moment to what you're ultimately trying to achieve.
So you ready for the next letter?
Sure. Tell us about the letter P and what that stands for.
Well, P in hope is for practices. This is probably where most of us focus when it comes to disciple making, and why we don't do a very good job of disciple making, because it's all insider kinds of things if we're not doing it, if it's not based upon this process of providing hope. But when we talk about practices, it's Bible studies, it's prayer, it's small groups, it's where we're reading the scriptures and being formed in Christ. That's not a bad thing. It's just not the only thing. This is the place of nurture, of learning, of growing. So it's the place that actually helps prepare us to be more who God would have us be in the larger sense. I think maybe you have a couple of examples for us there too.
So here are a couple around the connectedness talent theme. And just as a reminder, this talent theme is all about someone who has faith in the links among all things. They believe there are few coincidences and that almost everything and every event has meaning. So if they wanted to practice the faith through their connectedness talent theme, one of the things that someone with connectedness might do is look for the connections in Scripture. So think about the whole biblical arc from creation to the fall to redemption and then all the way through to restoration. And then if they really wanted to go crazy, they could begin connecting that biblical arc to their own story and their own faith story of, who were they created to be, as we've been talking about? What are the moments in their life that there's been a fall? They've fallen away and have not been faithful to who God is inviting them to be. Where did redemption come into play? And what is the restoration process that you're living into? The image that comes to my mind for this talent is kind of a spider web. There's all these things going in lots of different directions, and they can draw the lines and make the connections, not just to things, but to people. So that might be one way that they would practice the faith. Another way might be to clarify your purpose and to live by the values you hold to be true, because those values are going to connect you to other people that have similar values, or perhaps conflicting values, so that you can sit down and build a human connection with someone who has a different point of view from you. And it'll be an opportunity for you to find the meaning in that and to grow in understanding. This theme is really all about relationships. And so it's really more focused on people than it is on things.
So the final letter of hope is E, and we've talked about this in different ways before, because if you don't have engagement, you're really out of balance. You're just hopping. So we want you to hope. So you hospitality, offering Christ, practices, and now engagement. The question is, how are you serving with people in your community? And when I say community, I'm talking about your neighborhood, your city, your town, your county. How are you coming alongside people living in poverty, or people who are hungry, or people who are hurting? Or how do you partner with service groups and agencies in the community? Sarah, you've been really good today about giving us examples. You got one more?
I do. And this one comes from the developer talent theme. And someone who is talented with the developer theme recognizes and cultivates the potential in others. How perfect is that for engaging in service? They spot the signs of each small improvement and find satisfaction from evidence of any progress that is happening. So someone with this talent, they have an eye and a heart for potential. And so when I think about the work of serving in our communities and coming alongside people who are living in poverty and coming alongside people who are hurting, or even coming alongside our teachers in our local schools. Someone with a developer talent sees the potential. And so you might think about this as someone who has a glass half full, not half empty outlook on like life. And so they can use this talent to come alongside people who, let's say, for example, someone who might be in recovery from substance abuse or a health scare, or might be trying to reestablish their housing after a period of homelessness. And as you seek ways to develop a relationship with someone who needs a reminder that it is possible, that they can do it, that is naturally who God has wired you to be. And so you're going to be reminded of your own journey, and from your own journey, not that their journey is going to be exactly alike, but you'll have the ability to say to them, here's how it's possible. This is what I'm seeing God doing in your life. And this is the step that I'm seeing you're already taking. So how can I come alongside you? Folks with the developer strength who are using it well are great teachers, are great mentors, are great encouragers, are great people to help folks claim the possibility of what can be, because they already see the potential and they invest in that potential and walk with people through that growth. Another way, and this is different than what I just named, but that's the whole point of using these talents to live out being a disciple in specific ways. Spot signs of growth, those glimpses of goodness, as I like to say them, because they're clear signs of potential. So just in your everyday life, what's growing around you? Who's growing around you? Where do you see someone taking one small step and stop and celebrate it? If you're not sure where to connect in an act of service, for you, this is going to be a place that you can use to identify something that God is connecting in your heart and soul that is important to you because you're noticing it. And so that might be a place that you want to focus. I'm going to go back to the school example. So you might see a child in your neighborhood who in the summertime was flipping through books, but they couldn't read. And now they're able to spot a couple of words or form the first sounds of a word by sounding it out. And if you're saying, yes, isn't that awesome that now they're taking a step, it might be that you want to reach out to the school and say, hey, is there a way that I could come alongside kids and read with them? That would be a way that you could use the developer talent to serve in your community in a way that's connecting with you.
Sarah, we started our conversation today talking about how clarity drives connection. And we've given our listeners an example of how we've worked to make God's mission clear so people can connect to it. And we've also taken that a step farther, trying to help people see how the acronym HOPE and the different talents with that HOPE can help you live out that mission. It really comes down to the place is if you're willing to be clear, what is it that you have to offer? How is that related to the mission? And that's what we've tried to talk about today, of just getting that clear in ourselves so that we can help others be clear about the mission as well.
Yeah, so take, for example, the 4 different talent themes that I walked through and just gave you one example. Someone with learner, strategic, connectedness, and developer, they're going to live out hope in a different way than I'm going to, strategic, achiever, maximizer, relator, learner, because we have different talents. And so the specificity of that helps you to get clarity on how God has wired you. And as we said in the title of this episode, it animates the mission for you. It animates your purpose in terms of making disciples. Does that make sense in terms of what we've been talking about, Tim?
It makes sense to me. And I want to ask you a question, and that is, you've done this work with the 34 talents. Is there something we want to offer people a way in which they can live into who God created them to be? Is there something we can offer them at this point?
Yeah, so what I did say, and hear me clearly, I kind of nerded out on this. I took all 34 themes and mapped hope to that talent theme. And so how I work with folks on this is really in the context of a coaching conversation, because it can be overwhelming, especially if Clifton Strengths is something new to you, and especially if hope is something new to you. So here's what I'm going to just toss out into the airwaves for those that are listening to this podcast. The first person who reaches out to me, and I'm going to put a link on the show notes page, and says, I want my top 5. I want to learn how my top 5 can live out hope. We would love to have that conversation with you. And here's what it's going to require of you. We're going to record it for the podcast so that other people who hear the podcast can hear how a coaching conversation around your top 5 strengths, how that might unfold. It's going to be different for them. So this is just going to be an example, folks. But the first person who reaches out to us will have that coaching conversation, and we will record the audio of it so that we can share that with our listeners. And for the rest of you, we can certainly have a coaching conversation. And we'll link to how you can sign up for that on the show notes page as well.
I'm going to take just a second to encourage people to have at least a conversation with you, because this is one place that we can really become more who God created us to be. It's also a place where we can help our churches be more clear about living out the mission. And so I'm grateful for your work, and we'll offer that to folks, and we'll just see if they'll contact you and how that moves on. So the question we want to leave all of you with today is this: how clear are you in your connections, and how is that clarity helping you bring the mission to life? That's really where we are today. Now, part of what Sarah and I have been trying to do over the last few weeks is that what we do with the podcast, there's also a blog, and the blog this week, Should You Be Focused to a Fault? And I'm going to say yes. Some people think that being so focused and being called focused to a fault is an offense. I take it as a compliment. God's created you for a purpose, and if you're focused on that purpose, how can that be an offense to anyone else if they too are focused on their purpose?
So I'll wrap this episode up by reminding you that clarity drives connection and answers why it's important. When we have expectations that are clear, it's kind, and that drives connections. Clarity tells people who it is for and what it's about, and those 4 things drive you to the specificity that we shared with you in and through the Clifton Strengths and living out the acronym of HOPE. Also, you can follow Jesus every day. That's what disciple making is about, folks. So, as a reminder, if you're looking for clarity on how to grow as a Jesus follower, we invite you to take a 2-minute, 5-question quiz. And what you're going to learn is what season you're living in as a follower of Jesus and your next step to grow as a follower of Jesus. You'll find the link along with resources for this episode at transformingmission.org/103. So how about we get clear? How about we build connections? And how about you live out the mission of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world? Go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Bye for now.